Hi everybody, I'm back for another chapter of Jason Reynolds' Look Both Ways. We're on chapter 6. This is the trip home to Nestle Street. And the title of this chapter is called Satchmo's Master Plan. Satchmo's Master Plan. Today after school, Satchmo Jenkins worked out a master plan to save his life. A plan he wished he'd come up with a long time ago. It started back when Satchmo was little. He was 7 years old and the Rottweiler was 32 years old, which was old enough for him to know better, Satchmo had thought. The dog had taken a chunk out of the back of Satchmo's leg, left teeth marks that scarred in the shape of a sad face. It was a freak accident, a moment that no one could have predicted because Satchmo Jenkins never ever missed. Whenever a ball was thrown towards him, he was sure to snatch it from the air. He was known for this, but when Clancy had told him to go long and heaved the football into the air, Satchmo had tried his best to extend his body, stretched out for it, but it was just beyond him, overthrown. And when the ball hit the ground, it took the worst possible bounce right into Miss Adams' yard, where Brutus, the Rottweiler, lived, chained to a tree. When the ball tumbled Brutus's way, he jumped up, tail like a stubby index finger wagging hard enough to knock him off balance, nosed the ball and tried to get his mouth around it, tried to get his teeth locked down on the pigskin. But Brutus's excitement got the best of him, and he ended up knocking the ball just past the length of the chain restraining him. Perfect for Satchmo. "Yo, Satchmo!" Clancy had called. "Hurry up and get it before Miss Adams sees you." Miss Adams was Brutus's owner, an older lady who sat in the window and watched the neighborhood, making sure that no one stepped foot in her yard, as if her grass was a different kind of grass, like she had it flown in from wherever mean people get grass from. Sometimes we'd have the window wide open, even when it was freezing cold, and she'd just be sitting there looking, the bottom of her mouth sagging from the tobacco she always had stuffed down in her lip. Sometimes she'd spit black juice loogies halfway across the yard, clean pellet-sized ones, like shooting bullets out of her mouth. Other times, she'd spit in a jar. The rumor was that she'd mix the tobacco slime with Brutus's food, make him extra mean, make sure anyone that came into her yard knew they were dealing with a beast who could only be held by a big bull chain wrapped around a fat trunked tree. And when she saw Satchmo, instead of doing the old lady wave and, "Hey, how's your mother?" like some of the other grown-ups in the neighborhood, Miss Adams just nodded slightly. Satchmo had always imagined the inside of her house was like an old boxing gym. That it was bare and cold and smoky, heavy bags hanging from the ceiling that Miss Adams gave bare knuckle jabs and right hooks to. Maybe she even kicked them, kneed them. Some elbows. Sometimes Satchmo even thought that maybe he had it all wrong. That maybe Brutus wasn't Miss Adams' guard dog, but instead she was Brutus's guard lady. She was there to protect the dog, to bite anyone who tried to get close to him with those black-stained teeth. Satchmo had looked to see if Miss Adams was sitting in the window, then glanced back at Clancy, who shook his head no, as in, no, she ain't there, as in, yes, you should do this, as in, hurry up. So Satchmo tipped off the street and onto the sidewalk, then off the sidewalk and into the yard of Brutus Adams, a basketball-headed Rottweiler, black with a heart of brown around his mouth. "Hey there, Brutus," Satchmo whispered, creeping toward the football. There was nothing to fear because the ball was far enough away from the dog that there was no way that Brutus could get him. But with each step, Brutus's tail would wag harder and harder, wagging like, "Yes, yes, yes," and "No, no, no," at the same time. Wagging like, "I'm happy to see you and I want to play, but we play different games. You never miss. Me either." Wagging like, Satchmo picked up the ball, wiped the slobber on his jeans, finders keepers. He held the ball up, a sign of victory for Clancy to see. Clancy put his hands in the air as if Satchmo had just retrieved a fumble. Victory. Wag, 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 wag. Panting, jumping, jumping, barking. Losers. Runners. Satchmo glanced over his shoulder, and Brutus, now more excited than ever, was charging towards him. The chain snatching him back, but only for a second before he tried again, lifting up on his hind legs and towering over Satchmo, who had now started running back toward the street. But it was too late. The game had already begun. And seconds later, the chain snapped and Brutus came blasting toward Satchmo. Satchmo was named after Louis Armstrong, a famous jazz musician his grandmother loved. The story goes that Louis was nicknamed Satchmo because he had such a big mouth, a satchel mouth. However, Satchmo Jenkins' mouth wasn't big at all, but he learned that day that it could be a trumpet if he needed it to. It could stretch and screech and honk and run up and down a scale as long as there was a dog making him run up and down a street. 4 years later, Satchmo moved from his old neighborhood to Marlow Hill after his mother had taken a job as an office assistant at a veterinary clinic. Satchmo's run-in with Brutus had sparked a new dream of being a vet, and though she'd have to go through years of school and training to make that happen, she looked at this job, this move, as a step in the right direction. And now that she worked close to animals, she made sure that Satchmo knew how to handle himself around dogs. But no matter what his mother said, no matter what she taught him, it didn't matter. Fear had clamped down on his brain, and the scars on the back of his leg, the raised dots and dashes like Morse code on his skin, served as a reminder that dogs were dangerous. He'd heard people say, if they got teeth, they'll bite. And he watched his mother push back and argue against that. And on the flip side, he'd seen all the commercials of sad pups locked behind cages, sick and shivering, and the voice of some celebrity trying to convince people to adopt one. And he'd say, sometimes out loud, maybe they're in there for a reason. His mother didn't like when he said that either. Your bite was a misunderstanding, Satch, she'd say. He wanted to play, but you got tense. So then he got tense because your tension made it clear to him that you weren't playing. Why would I want to play when he was barking and growling? His play looked like bite. But small dogs don't bother him. As long as they were no bigger than a football, he could deal. Anything bigger caused his back to tighten, made his heart bark. Thankfully, since living in Marlow Hill, his walks home had been dogless. Until yesterday. Yesterday, he was walking down Nestle Street when he passed Mr. Jerry's house and saw something out of the corner of his eye. Something big and furry. It darted across the patch of grass Mr. Jerry had along the side of his house, blocked off by a chain-link fence. Satchmo's stomach dropped to his feet, his throat twisted like twines making rope. He turned his head to see what he knew he'd already seen, to make sure that his first thought and peripheral vision hadn't lied. Mr. Jerry had gotten a dog. Mr. Jerry's wife had passed away a few months ago. A week later, Satchmo stood with his mother at Mr. Jerry's front door, a houseplant in hand. His mother was holding a pound cake that she'd made him as a way to say sorry for your loss. And Satchmo wished the pound cake was enough and that his mother didn't have to keep talking and suggest that Mr. Jerry get a dog. Adopt one from a shelter, she said. Pound cake, not a dog from the pound, Satchmo thought. Lose a life, save another, his mother said to Mr. Jerry sweetly. To take mine, Satchmo had thought. Mr. Jerry said no, said he wasn't ready. Guess he was ready now. And not for a small one either. Not for a furry football, but for a big husky thing that looked like it was mixed. Some German Shepherd, some Labrador, some Rottweiler, some monster that Satchmo wasn't sure was there or not, but decided it was so. That was all he needed to see to start devising plans, escape routes. Today, after school, Satchmo Jenkins left his last class of the day, math, and headed to his locker in a haze. He opened it, swapped out books, and stuck his head in his locker for a moment to take a few deep breaths to get himself together. This walk home wasn't going to be a big one that he hoped wouldn't result in him adding a smiley-faced scar on his other leg. Satch, catch, John Watson called out, tossing a textbook to Satchmo, who looked up at just the right time to not be hit in the face. He blocked the book with his hands, then tried to grab a hold, tried to catch it, fumbling it before it hit the floor. "You left it in Mrs. Stevens' class," John said. He pulled a few random sandwich bags from his pocket, folded them awkwardly, and then stuffed them back down. "Oh, good looks," Satchmo said, trying to snap himself out of it, or at least pretend he was never snapped into it. Lifesaver. "No problem," John said, before hustling off. Satchmo picked the book up, tossed it in the air, caught it. A small piece of paper slid out from between the pages, an invitation to Cynthia Sauer's comedy show. But Satchmo was in no mood for laughing. He tossed the book in the air again, caught it again, before putting it in his bag and closing the locker door. Snap. After he got outside, headed toward the corner, made the right on Portal as if walking toward Chestnut Street, but making the right onto Nestle before getting to Chestnut, he started running down his game plan, amping himself up for the mission. That's what this was for him. A mission. Okay, Satch, you're prepared. You've thought it all through. You will not get bit. You will not get eaten. Breathe. Satch, breathe. And work it all out. If the dog jumps the fence, when the dog jumps the fence, don't panic. Just do what you've planned. Brake to the right. If Mr. Jerry's pickup truck is parked on the street, jump into the back of it and scream for help. That's the first base. That's your go-to. But if for some reason Mr. Jerry's truck isn't there, if for some reason he's out, I don't know, saving other dogs while his neighbors run for their lives, then keep going right onto the Carter's property. You won't have time to ring their doorbell. Plus, Mr. and Mrs. Carter will be at work, so run. Behind their house, they have a pool. It's not a big pool, and actually, you've never even seen it, but you remember your mother talking about how all the neighbors are gossiping about how they were putting a pool in their backyard in this neighborhood, as she was saying it like she wasn't gossiping too. So if there's actually a pool back there, dive in. Don't worry how deep it is. You can swim. It's kind of interesting how Jason Reynolds wrote the text on the page. There's spaces and places, and not everything is bumped up on the margin. Not really sure why he did that, but it reminds me of one of the videos that we watched toward the beginning of the year when he was talking about how placing the words on the page, creating kind of a rhythm, a pause. I tried to read it that way. Okay, so his inner thoughts are continuing on, and we're kind of seeing the next thing on the same thing on the next few pages where there's these extra spaces left in, and I'm going to kind of, I guess, read them as pauses. Just jump in there. Hopefully the dog won't even follow you back there, but if it does, maybe it won't jump in the pool. But if for some reason it does jump in, you jump out immediately. The thing is, dogs have to do that ridiculous doggy paddle thing, so they can't be vicious and do that at the same time. They also can't do that fast. They're dogs, not seals. So when you hop out, you'll have a head start before the dog gets to the other side of the pool and climbs back onto land. Use this time to jump the fence. Your mother says the Carters put up to keep Miss Winston's little kids from playing in their pool that we're not sure exists. But the fence is there. You know that. It's not too high, but get a running start because you're going to be soaking wet. If you still can't get over, then as quickly as possible, take off your shirt and pants and shoes and try again. Sure, you need your clothes, but you need your life more. Your mother will understand, and you'll get over the embarrassment of being outside in your underwear. Once you're over the fence, you should be safe because the dog should be too tired from all the swimming to jump the fence. But it's going to try, and while it's trying, you better be booking it back to the street at home. But if for some reason when you get back to the street, the dog is there waiting for you, man, you might be dead. No. If for some reason the dog is there waiting for you, break off and jump on that old car that's been sitting in front of Sidani's house. After Sidani had his car stolen a few years ago, he only ever buys old crappy cars that he can't get working. So he won't mind you jumping on the hood. And if the dog jumps on the hood with you, climb off the roof. The dog should slip on the windshield some, but don't count on that. While he's slipping and sliding, jump off the car and see if it's unlocked. Sidani never locks the doors of those cars because he knows they're impossible to start and they're impossible to steal. If it's open, jump in, close the door. This is a safe place because you don't need to turn the car on to roll the windows down. It will have the old kind of window down roller. It will have the old kind of window roll downer. Crack the windows and scream until help comes. But if for some reason the door is locked, pull the sausage patties you saved from this morning's breakfast out and fling them like frisbees. If the dog doesn't go for them, though, really, who wouldn't? Then you'll have to break out your routes, your zigzags. Just like back when you and Clancy pretended to be in the Super Bowl, him the quarterback and you the wide receiver. Where do you think Clancy is? What do you think he's doing right now? Throwing Hail Marys, running the opposite way, not helping his teammates? Why didn't he chase Brutus? Why didn't he tackle him? If he would have tackled him, you would have barked at it, growled at it, so it knew what that felt like. Not important right now. What's important is making sure you have your zigs and zags ready. Be prepared to cut. Left and cut right. Stutter and juke. Stagger and jerk. He has 4 legs and you have 2. There's no way the dog will be able to keep up, right? Or maybe the more legs, the better? Who knows? But do it anyway. Zig and zag. All the way home. When you get to your house, run around to the side door that you left unlocked this morning, knowing your mother would kill you if she knew you left the door unlocked because y'all don't have a guard dog or an alarm system. If for some reason, some strange reason, that side door is locked, well, Satchmo, you'll have to just pray for a miracle, a distraction, something crazy like a school bus falling from the sky. This is what Satchmo told himself, what he was ready to execute, the master plan to save his life. As he approached Mr. Jerry's house, Satchmo had purposefully walked on the other side of the street to give himself a bit of advantage. No need to bait the beast. As he slinked past Mr. Jerry's front door, coming up on the side yard, Satchmo's backbone became rawhide. His stomach a squishy chew toy, his palms wet, but his fingers dry like dog treats when he heard the bark. Well, not really a bark, but the gruff voice of an old man. Satch! Satch! Mr. Jerry was calling out for him. He was kneeling behind the fence, rubbing the dog's head, its tongue slapping the old man's cheek. No bite. Love. Satch, come here, Mr. Jerry said, his face a touchdown dance all its own. I want to introduce you to my friend. Lots of metaphors, not extended metaphors, but lots of metaphors at the very end of this chapter. Satchmo's backbone became rawhide, his stomach a squishy chew toy, his palms wet, but his fingers dry like dog treats when he heard the bark. That was a simile. Use the word like. And then we ended with a metaphor. Satch, come here, Mr. Jerry said. His face a touchdown dance all its own. I want to introduce you to my friend. And that is the end of the chapter of Satchmo's walk home from school on Nestle Street.